Welcome to Dark Historical, where forgotten secrets, dark events, and hidden truths of the past come alive before your eyes.
The Crimson Snow, A Winter at Donner Pass. Prologue, The Promise. They called it the California Trail, a ribbon of hope stretching 2,500 miles across a continent. For George Donner, a prosperous 62-year-old farmer from Springfield, Illinois, it was the final gamble of a settled life. The year was 1846. Reports trickled east of a paradise where fruit fell heavy from trees and the soil yielded crops without complaint. He sold his farm, invested in wagons that were palaces on wheels, the Pioneer Palace car, with its built-in stove and second-story bunks for his family. He was elected captain of a large, optimistic party, 87 souls, with 20 wagons, 100 head of cattle, a library of books, and fine china packed in straw. They were not desperate. They were ambitious. Their brutal story begins not with hardship, but with a simple, terrible choice. Part 1. The Cutoff. July 19, 1846, Little Sandy River, Wyoming Territory. The party rested at the parting of the ways. The well-established trail swung north to Fort Hall, then down, safe, proven, longer. A new route, the Hastings Cutoff, promised by the ambitious promoter Lansford Hastings in his guidebook, beckoned straight west across the Great Salt Lake Desert. It would save 350 miles. A rider brought a note from Hastings himself, currently guiding another party ahead. Avoid the northern route. The cutoff is passable, but hasten, do not delay. James Reed, a wealthy Irish immigrant and Donner's friend, urged the new route. Time was everything. A winter in the Sierra Nevada was unthinkable. Old trappers at the river muttered into their beards about waterless stretches and salt flats that could poison oxen. Their warnings were lost in the clatter of wagon repairs and the impatient cries of children. They voted. The decision was near unanimous. They turned their wagons south toward the Wasatch Mountains, leaving the known world behind. It was the first turn toward the snow. August, the Wasatch Mountains. The cutoff was a lie. No wagon trail existed. It was a wilderness of dense scrub oak, vertical canyons, and dead ends. The men, wearing through boots and sanity, had to carve a road with axes and will. For 18 hours a day, they swung blades at stubborn timber. Women dragged brush and rocks. Progress was measured in yards per day. A month's worth of energy and time, their most precious commodity, bled into the unforgiving Utah ground. "We curse Hastings' name every day," wrote Patrick Breen in his diary, one of the few artifacts that would survive. But forward is the only direction left. September, the Great Salt Lake Desert. They emerged from the mountains exhausted, only to face a blinding white plain stretching to the horizon. Hastings' note had said the desert crossing was 40 miles. It was 80. The sun was a hammer. The salt crust, sharp as glass, tore at the oxen's hooves. Waterholes were alkaline poison. They abandoned wagons. They unloaded precious food, heirlooms, George Donner's books to lighten loads. The wood of the wagons popped in the heat. Children's lips cracked and bled. After 6 days and nights of hell, they stumbled onto water at the foot of the Pilot Range. They had lost 30 oxen. 4 wagons were left behind. They were now 3 weeks behind any party that had taken the northern route. The specter of the Sierra, now snow-capped in the far distance, began to whisper to them in their dreams.
October 28, 1846, Truckee Lake, now Donner Lake. The first snow fell not as a storm, but as a soft, fat, indifferent flurry.
It dusted the towering pines and the exhausted oxen. It melted on the hot brows of the men straining at the wheels, trying to force the last wagons up a steep, rocky slope called the Truckee Pass. They were spent. The animals were skeletons. A freezing rain turned the trail to ice. The axle of George Donner's prized wagon snapped. In the frantic repair, a wheel lurched and a linchpin whipped loose, gashing his hand. It was a shallow cut, but in the cold and filth it would fester. That night the temperature plummeted. The soft snow became a raging blizzard. When they woke, it was to a new world. 5 feet of snow still falling. The pass was utterly, irrevocably blocked. Their final, desperate push had come hours too late. They retreated to the relative shelter of a meadow by the lake. They were 44 souls now. Some had turned back earlier. Across them lay the granite teeth of the Sierra Nevada. Behind them, hundreds of miles of desert and mountain they could never recross. They were in a beautiful, freezing prison. November. Makeshift hells. They built shelters, not cabins, hovels. 3 of them, 2 by the lake cabins, 1 6 miles back in Alder Creek Valley, where the Donner family and others, stranded by George's injury, had been forced to camp. They were dug into the south side of a hill, with roofs of logs, hides, and canvas, and chimneys of stuck-together branches that smoked endlessly. At the lake they slaughtered the last oxen. The meat was stringy, frozen. They rationed it with religious solemnity. Then they ate the hides, boiling them for days into a glue-like, barely nutritious jelly. They boiled twigs and bones. They ate the field mice that sought warmth in the cabins. Patrick Breen's diary became the grim ledger of their existence. November 21. Snowed all night. Dull prospect for provisions. Snow 6 feet deep. December 1. Terrible snowstorm. We are in a dreadful situation. December 15. Hungry times in camp. We have but a little meat left. Sickness set in. The cold was a constant gnawing beast. Children cried less, then not at all. They stared with huge eyes and gaunt faces. The snow, now over 20 feet deep, pressed on the roofs, requiring constant digging from the inside to prevent collapse. The world shrank to the fire's circle of heat, the taste of boiled hide, and the white, silent wall outside the door. December 16, 1846. A decision was made. 17 of the strongest, 10 men, 5 women, and 2 boys, would attempt to cross the mountains on foot to get help. They called themselves the Forlorn Hope. They were poorly equipped with makeshift snowshoes of ox bows and rawhide, and 6 days of pitiful rations, a few strips of dried beef per person. They climbed the very pass that had defeated their wagons. For days they battled through deep, soft snow. Their rations vanished. A new storm trapped them in a blinding fury. They built a snow cave and huddled. Starvation began to break the thin veneer of civilization. It was here, in that desperate pit, that the final taboo was discussed, then broken. They drew lots. Who would die so that others might live? The lot fell to a man named Patrick Dolan. He was dying of exposure already. But it was not the lottery that unfolded next. In the chaos of delirium and despair, as members began to die naturally, the survivors did what was necessary. The flesh of the dead sustained the living. For 33 days, the remnant of the Forlorn Hope staggered through the wilderness. They became creatures of bone and will. When they finally stumbled into a Miwok Indian village at the foot of the Western Sierras on January 17, 1847, only 7 remained alive, 2 men and all 5 women. They had survived on names that would never be spoken aloud again. Their message was simple, delirious. There are people in the mountains. They are eating the dead. Come quickly.
February 1847, the first rescue party. News reached Sutter's Fort in California. A first relief party of 7 men, led by a rugged trapper named Aquila Glover, fought its way up the mountains through snow deeper than any living man had seen. On February 19, they stumbled into the lake cabins. They found a scene from a Gothic nightmare. Silent, snow-buried hovels, a stench of decay and wood smoke, emaciated figures with hollow eyes, some unable to rise, bodies carefully stored in the snow, evidence of the unthinkable, now a grim, accepted fact of survival. The rescuers, heartsick and horrified, had limited strength. They could only take those who could walk. The hardest choices were given to the parents. At Alder Creek, Tamzine Donner, George's wife, was faced with an agony. Her husband's hand was gangrenous. He could not travel. Her youngest children were too weak. She sent her 3 older daughters with the rescuers. She would stay with George and the little ones. She kissed her daughters goodbye, her face a mask of tragic strength. She believed another party would come soon. They carried 21 starving survivors out. On the brutal return trek, food ran low again. Rescuers watched in horror as some of the refugees, their instincts now animalistic, produced hidden packets of dried human flesh to eat. March, April 1847. Subsequent rescues. 2 more relief parties clawed their way in. Each time they found fewer alive and conditions more harrowing. At Alder Creek, they found George Donner dead in his bed, Tamzine refusing to leave his body. She would die there, alone, waiting for a 4th party that would come too late. The final party, in April, found only 1 man alive at the lake camps, surrounded by unspeakable scenes. Of the 87 original party members, 48 had survived. Of the 15 who tried to cross the mountain in the forlorn hope, 8 had survived. At the camps, survival had favored the ruthless, the lucky, and, heartbreakingly, often not the strongest. Epilogue: The Harvest of Bones. The survivors reached California, their ordeal a sensational, horrifying national news story. They were shunned, pitied, and haunted. They never fully reunited as a community. The children, like 4-year-old Eliza Donner, who lost both parents, were raised by different families. In the spring thaw of 1847, a party returned to the camps to bury the dead. They found bones, scattered by animals, sun-bleached and clean. They found George Donner's body, money still tucked in his belt. They found the diary of Patrick Breen, its final simple entry: "Fine morning, expecting someone from the States." They buried what they could in the melting mud of the meadow. The story of the Donner Party became the darkest American parable. It was not a story of heroic frontier endurance, but a meticulously documented descent into a moral and physical abyss. It was a story born not from poverty or desperation, but from a gamble for a better life, a trusted lie on a piece of paper, a few days' delay, and a single early snowfall. It revealed the brutal truth that in the face of the indifferent mountain, all promises, plans, and principles could be stripped away, leaving only the raw, unflinching will to see the next sunrise. The frontier's brutality was not just in the claws of beasts or the arrows of warriors. It was in the quiet, accumulating depth of the snow, the emptiness of a desert promised to be short, and the terrible, silent choices made in a snow cave, in the dark, with the last ember of hope guttering out.